Hello, I'm Ron Squire. Welcome to highlights of the 2026 Formula SimRacing World Championship. After a few months out, the top SimRacing league in the world is rumbling into action once again. The season kicks off with the Australian Grand Prix. 58 laps around the Albert Park Lake in Melbourne is one of the few street circuits on the calendar. This circuit composes of sweeping corners and chicanes running across a very flat track. A great place for the racers, this place is aptly named. It's certainly a test for the drivers. With limited runoff areas, there's almost no room for error across this 5.3km season opener. The qualifying rules remain the same for 2026, a 10-minute session around limited laps, though bound by Park for May rules. And a surprise pole position taken by Alex Lahu, who returns to the World Championship after a year absence driving for ALMMV, the sister team of MV Conquest. Lahu's sister teammate Luca Moinier qualifies in the second, just 500ths off the pole. Jan Grankvist also returns after a year absence in the second ALMMV car, with Ruben Machete in fourth for Optimal Esports. Defending champion Mark Schluter was 1.5 tenths off the pole as he drives for his new team, Ground Effect, following withdrawal of CMT Go Team. Jans Braxov, driving for Optimale, qualifies in 6th with World Championship debutant Lucas Murdo in 7th, the Brazilian driving for Optimal Hosting. Former World Champion Peter Burlak also returns to drive for MV Conquest in 8th. Moritz Kropp makes his FSR debut with Mission 19 Velo 1 GP in their first outing in the World Championship in 9th, and Christian Pascal, driving for Squire Nation Esports, puts the Welsh team in the top 10 for the very first time. Zolksux just misses out on the top 10 by 0.003 of a second, qualifying in the second Squire Nation Esports car driven by Giuseppe Saracino. Australian Team 7 Arrows make their World Championship debut with William Snowden in 14th and Amin Zwisi in 15th. Invictus Motorsport make their return to the World Championship fully with Nando Marza in 16th and Matt Touzon in 18th. And after a last minute deal, Valley Esports returns to the World Championship grid. Ruben van der Hudding in 17th and her teammate Giuseppe Canzonieri in 20th. With a grid of 21 starters and a mix of new faces and names to the grid, the opening round is set to be very thrilling indeed. To the race start, everyone got away cleanly with the MV affiliated teams jostling positions. Both ALM MV cars lead ahead of Munier, with Machete looking for a glimpse on the inside. Disaster and Furl at turn 3 as Saracino nudges Sapinen in the back, causing the Finn to lose the back end. The Constantino effect also catches out Suisi. Though all three recovered, Sapinen's suspension was compromised, and whilst turning for turn 5, the Finn crashed and collected Saracino, forcing both men to retire, while Suisi was lucky to avoid carnage. At the front, Machete would make his move on Munier at turn 13, the German up into third after a fantastic overtake on the outside. At the end of the opening lap, the top 10 was Lahu, Grankvist, Machete, Munier, Schluter, Kropp, Braxok, Murdo, Burlak and Zux. Van den Hudding's afternoon was cut short not later on, the Dutchman spinning off at turn 1 and slammed his rear left into the barrier on lap 3. The string of early retirements goes on with Leo Petraglia in the Elk International and, shockingly, Ruben Machete. Like with Van den Hudding, both drivers at separate instances on the same lap lost the back end at turn 1 and both slammed into the barrier separately. Petraglia was left with terminal damage, whilst Machete was left with only a broken front wing and damaged suspension, causing the latter's retirement. A bad afternoon already for Optimal. It would get worse for the Dutch outfit. Optimale driver Zolksux loses the back end coming out at turn 12, slamming his front into the wall and inadvertently collecting Zalagianis, sending the Hungarian out of the race, while Zalagianis, by some miracle, was able to continue back to the pits. 3 separate retirements in 1 lap. Lap 6 of the MV trio lead from the pack with the world champion Mark Schluter in tow. Moritz Kropp is the sole Mission 19 Velo 1 GP driver in 5th, with Lucas Murdo in the Optimal hosting in 6th. Jans Braxov for Optimale is in 7th, just under a second in front of Peter Burlak. Nando Marza is having a decent race with Invictus in 9th, whilst Christian Pascal in his first outing for Squire Nation Esports is in 10th. Pascal's position seems to be under threat with the emergence of Giuseppe Canzonieri in the Valley Esports car. But the Italian's head is calm under pressure, so much so that on the next lap, Pascal even made a move on Nando Marza at turn 3, slightly nudging the Hungarian to move up to 9th. It would get worse for Marza as on lap 9, Canzonieri makes his move on the sweeping turn 12 on the outside of the Invictus driver, forcing the Hungarian to back off and relinquish the position despite trying to get it back almost immediately. The sole Valley driver is now in the top 10. Lap 12 and an early contender for battle of the season begins, as Jans Braxok looks up on the inside of Moritz Kropp at turn 13. The German holds his ground until he loses a little bit of grip, allowing an opening for Braxok as well as Peter Burlak from behind, but again Kropp holds his ground. However, it wasn't long before the German lost grip on the position, as Braxok goes for an overtake on the outside of turn 1. The move was made, but slight contact was made between the pair, allowing Kropp to regain a little bit of ground, whilst Burlak crept up. The 3 men went wheel to wheel at turn 3, with Braxok finally taking the 6. Kropp would lose a little bit of the back end again at the next corner, giving away 7th to Burlak. Kropp would make the switch to hards on lap 17, as the first scheduled stops of the race begins. The German rejoins in 12th, 2 seconds behind Snowden and just in front of Touzon. Pascal makes his stop on lap 19, and to surprise much of the field, the Italian fits on softs. Is that a gamble to pay off for Squire Nation Esports? Pascal rejoins in 11th, just in front of Cancellieri, who himself also goes in for a stop on the same lap. After chasing down Marza on the previous couple of laps, Moritz Krop finally makes his move on the Hungarian at turn 1, sending the Mission 19 Velo 1 driver up into 8th on lap 21, and on the same lap, Pascal also gets back into the top 10 with a simple overtake on William Snowden at turn 3. Pascal then moves up into 9th with an overtake on Marza at turn 1 on the next lap. Lap 23, and after being behind Meunier since the start of the race, Mark Schutter makes a great overtake on the Frenchman at turn 11 for 3rd. Meunier attempts to get the position back, but the world champion holds firm as the German pulls away. MV's afternoon starts to become a little bit more complacent as Grandfist nudges the barrier at turn 3, forcing the Flynn off onto the gravel trap. The ALM MV driver was able to continue, but loses both 2nd and 3rd to both Schluter and Meunier respectively. Pascal's unbelievable run continues with an audacious overtake on Krop at turn 3 on lap 28, the Italian now up into 8th place. At halfway distance, Lehoux leads the race virtually unchallenged, but must be wary of a certain Schluter on his tail. Loic Meunier remains in 3rd despite his position swap with the world champion a few laps ago, with sister teammate Jan Grankvist paying the price of his earlier excursion. Lucas Murdo holds up honours for optimal hosting in 5th, Peter Berlak is in 6th but is keeping Jonas Braxock at bay. Christian Pascal on a demon run since his pit stop for softs, the Italian up into 8th having overtaken Moritz Krop on the previous lap, and Nando Marza still in the top 10 for Invictus. To ensure there's a smooth strategy between the MV affiliated teams, Loic Meunier lets through Jan Grankvist through at turn 11, sending the Finn up into 3rd to try and chase down Schluter. Having struggled since the start of the race, George Zalgianis finally calls the race quits on lap 33 after a spin at turn 5 saw the Greek scrape one barrier and badly damaging his rear suspension on the other, forcing the ground effect driver out. Lap 35 and Lucas Murdo finally catches up and tries to attempt to overtake Meunier at turn 1, but the two-touch causing the Brazilian to lose his balance, sending the optimal hosting driver into a spin. To make matters worse, the Brazilian inadvertently collects Braxock, causing damage to both cars. Braxock was able to continue, but Murdo's race ends in the pits just 2 laps later. Lap 37 and Who makes his first and only stop of the race, meaning for the first time in 2026, Mark Schluter is leading the Grand Prix whilst Who rejoins in 4th on the mediums, just behind Meunier. The Frenchman will pit on lap 39. Lap 41 and Schluter makes a stop for mediums, surrendering the lead back to Lehoux after Grankvist made his stop on the previous lap. The world champion rejoins in 2nd. Lap 43 and after his collision with Lucas Murdo just 9 laps ago, Jans Braxock is struggling in 10th, and to make matters worse, he could not find a suitable way past the Invictus of Nando Marza. The Invictus driver himself is embroiled in a battle for 8th with Giuseppe Cancellieri. The cat and mouse chase would last until lap 45, with the Ottomali driver overtaking Marza at turn 13 on the outside. Marza would pit at the end of the lap. After dealing with Marza, Braxock is now a cork out of a bottle and blasts past Cancellieri on the lead up to turn 11, taking 8th in the process. Cancellieri also pits at the end of the lap, rejoining in 10th behind Marza. As we approach the last 10 laps of the race, the order was beginning to take shape. Alex Lehoux leads by an astonishing 13 seconds ahead of Mark Schluter. The world champion himself has holding off Jan Grankvist. Loic Meunier is keeping an eye on things in 4th with teammate Peter Berlak over 10 seconds behind in 5th. Christian Pascal's race is starting to become quiet, the Italian pushing Squire Nation Esports to their first ever top 10 finish. Moritz Krop's race is back on track after his earlier misdemeanors, a German up into 7th. Jans Braxock's race is now becoming steady in 8th, Will Snowden holds on to 9th, whilst Nando Marza holds off 10th from Giuseppe Cancellieri. The battle for 10th becomes tense in the last 10 laps, with Cancellieri getting a good run up on Marza in the lead up to turn 11. With great execution, the Italian overtakes the Invictus driver for 10th, a good bit of news in a turbulent race for Valley Esports. 4 laps from the end, Jan Grankvist is doing all he can to put as much pressure as possible on Mark Schluter, and it seemed to have worked with the world champion losing the back end a little bit at turn 12, giving the opening to Grankvist for an overtake at turn 13. But the German holds his nerve and more importantly holds his position all the way to the finish line. With the first pole, fastest lap and the first race win of 2026, Alex Lehoux puts everyone in the World Championship on notice for a potential domination by ALMMV and MV Conquest. The world champion Mark Schluter himself finishes in 2nd in a decent performance for his new team, and Jan Grankvist shows he's lost none of his skill, finishing in 3rd. Loic Meunier can only contend with 4th on his return, whilst Peter Berlak makes it all 4 MV affiliated cars in top 5. the MVP of the race undoubtedly goes to Christian Pascal. Having avoided the first calamity, the Italian brings the sole Squire Nation Esports car home in 6th. Moritz Kropp had a fantastic debut in 7th, whilst James Braxtock had a difficult time in Melbourne to finish 8th. Both William Snowden and Giuseppe Canzonieri finished in the top 10 for the first time in their World Championship careers. The driver's table is a direct reflection of the race, the winner getting 25 points and the rest of the finishing top 15 scoring. In the constructors it's more complex, but not for the MV affiliated teams. ALM MV lead ahead of MV Conquest by 16 points, rFactor in 3rd thanks to shooters' contributions, Squire Nation Esports in the highest position yet thanks to Christian Pascal's finish, along with 7 Arrows, who had a brilliant outing to put the Australian team in joint 4th place. Mission 19 Velo 1 GP and Invictus Motorsport share 6th. Ottomali had a difficult time in Melbourne, which is represented by 8th in the standings. Valley Esports are on the board thanks to Canzonieri's points, whilst Optimal Hosting, Elk International and Optimal Esports gained no points from the opening round. The next race is the Japanese Grand Prix at Suzuka International Racing Course on Sunday the 5th of April. You can watch that race live as it happens right here on our YouTube channel. Qualifying begins at 8:25pm GMT with the race starting at 8:45pm GMT. In the meantime, you can join in on our forums at formula-simracing.net as well as our Discord server for up-to-date information and join in on the community. The links are in the description below, and you can follow us on Facebook, Instagram and TikTok. We hope you enjoyed today's presentation. I'm Ron Squire and join us for the next round of the 2026 Formula Sim Racing World Championship.